All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from, and welcome to another edition of Spring Office Hours. My name is Dan Vega. With me, as always, my friend, my coworker, DaShaun. How are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful. Life is good. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. So yeah,
Me
I'm
too.
excited.
We
Excited to
are
get started.
excited to have a guest in the house today. Our friend Jonatan from the Spring team is going to be talking to us about observability. Jonatan, welcome.
Hi, welcome. Hi, everyone.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do here at VMware, and what we're going to be talking about today?
Yes, I am like a member of the Spring engineering team. So I work on projects in the Spring portfolio. These are mainly Micrometer, which is the most popular metrics backend on the JVM, and Spring Cloud Sleuth. But since my domain is kind of like observability, that's why I usually work on like other projects as well who has like needs for in this area. Uh, I live in Seattle. I am one of the leaders of the Seattle Java user group. You can find me there as well. And yeah, I guess today we are going to talk about observability and also what new things we are brewing for Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3 in the observability space.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for being here. Before we get started talking about this, we just want to take a quick minute or two here, as we do with every show, and just kind of talk about what's new in the Spring community, some things we want to highlight and let you know about. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. As always, we start with calendar.spring.io. It's a nice way to kind of look at what releases are happening this week, last week, next week. So as we remember last week, we talked about one of the big releases was the Spring Boot 3.0.0 milestone 5. Some exciting things around AOT happened in that release. And I want to highlight a quick blog article from one of the Spring Team engineering members, Stefan. Had a really good blog post on what is happening in Spring Boot 3.0.0 milestone 5. It's a big release. A lot of the AOT stuff is in there now. They're asking for feedback. And it's a really good walkthrough on like, hey, what does this mean? How do I use it? How do I get started with it? I also know, DaShaun, you are working on a guide for kind of GraalVM. When can we expect to see that?
That should be here any day now. And really,
All right.
the guide that I'm working on is really, hey, let's get you introduced to the Graal VM, understand
Cool.
how it can be both AOT and JIT, just in time and ahead of time compiling. I just kind of like
Awesome.
to crack the seal, use the Graal VM,
Cool.
see how it works in Spring. And yeah, just get started. That should be out any day.
Cool. We'll make sure if that's out, we'll kind of take a look at that next week. But that'll kind of go hand in hand with this. A really good article on getting started with this stuff. And then back to the calendar, some releases this week on Spring Shell. We have 2.1.2 and 3.0.0 milestone 1, which I'm guessing is aligning with Spring Boot 3. So exciting stuff there. Spring Shell, again, we keep talking about this. One of those projects that I need to find time for. I know you saw my tweet earlier this week. I really want to put together a project and work with Spring Shell. So I'm gonna be hitting you up, DaShaun, because I know you have some experience with that. So
Deal.
One other thing I want to mention, Spring 1 is coming up this 2 months away. Wow, 2 months away. December 6th through the 8th in San Francisco. You can head over to spring1.io. We have posted a lot of content on there. So if you go over to speakers, you can see a whole list of all the speakers we have. Not all, but some. There's a lot of individuals on there, including a couple people in this room right here. All three of these people, I think. And then you go over to schedule, you can kind of drill down, or I'm sorry, if you click into one of the speakers here and say, go over to the sessions, you can take a look at sessions. You can also drill down by different topics. And then if you go into workshops, you can see what workshops are available. And of course, we've been telling you this, but DaShaun and I are doing a Getting Started with Spring Boot workshop that we are both very excited about. I'm only pulling my website up because I have the code on there. And if you go over to my newsletter, if you're signed up for my newsletter, You don't have to be. You can just go to the newsletter, the latest one. If you grab this code right here, this will give you $200 off your registration. This is important because today is the last day for early bird registration. So it's going to go up tomorrow. So if you were to register today and use this code, you're going to save a whole ton of money. So I'm not throwing this out there to get you to register. I'm throwing this out there because I want to see you at Spring One. So I'm not being asked by management to push this. I'm pushing this because I want to see you at Spring One. So go ahead and register. Anything else you guys want to talk about Spring One? I know, what's your plans for Spring One, DaShaun?
I am doing a talk with Spencer on boring Spring apps with superpowers, active with Redis, and how easy it is to have a Spring app that is active and across regions, across clouds. It's really easy to do.
That sounds
surprisingly
fun.
Easy. It will be fun.
I like that. And then Jonatan, see your name here too.
Yeah, I surprised. I am going to talk about observability. Yeah, so one of them is like the VTDT observability team, which is Marcin Szczeszczak, and Tommy Ludwig, and me. We the three of us will do a talk where we introduce the new things that is coming in Spring Framework and Boot 3. And also I am going to do another talk with Moritz, who is from the Boot team. And we are going to talk about what you can find in Boot around observability.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. All right. I think that's really all I have with kind of news. DaShaun, do you have anything you want to add to what's new?
I've got nothing new. Nothing new to add.
All right, cool. Well, I think we can just get into it then. So I think maybe a good place to start is just on the topic of what observability is, because I know, there's a lot of things that fall under that bucket. So maybe can you talk to us at a high level on what observability is?
Yeah. So observability is basically, I would say it depends who you ask in the first place, but I guess most of the people, and also Wikipedia, it defines observability as all of those things that you can use, that you can build into your application, that will provide you meaningful outputs about what is happening inside of the application. And this is a quite broad definition, I would say. Some people are saying that, hey, like there is this thing called the 3 pillars of observability, which is logging metrics and distributed tracing. And that's what observability really is. I have different opinion about this, and I believe like a lot of people do have. For example, to me, health checks are also observability. It's kind of like an output signal that will like let you peek into your application, what is going on inside. Also, the Spring Boot actuator info endpoint. It is also, to me, very much belongs to this observability landscape. But yeah, people are usually getting into this direction of logging metrics and distributed tracing. By the way, my opinion is like, you don't necessarily need all these 3 actually to have like some sort of a good level of observability. Depending on your situation, you can get away just by logs. I am not saying you should do that because you should not. But yeah, in my like dark ages, I did that. I worked at a company, and they did not let me having a metrics backend, and they did not let me to have like a distributed tracing backend. So I basically pushed everything into logs, and I was able to like, for a limit, was able to get out some data about what is going on inside. But yeah, the big things, the big building blocks are these 3.
Cool. So I think logging is a really good place to start. So as you said, you may not, you don't want to rely just on logging, but if I'm just starting out, trying to add something to my app to give me some observability into what is going on, logging is probably a good place to do that. at what point have you started logging too much, and when logging is not going to be enough for what you're trying to do? When do you kind of hit that threshold of like, okay, I need to look at the next step, which you said is kind of metrics?
So to me, I would try to do that from the beginning. Like once you like start an application, I would put these three from the get-go, because like once you start having like more and more like applications, and you are receiving more and more traffic, logging might not get you too far in terms of you will produce a lot of them. You need to ingest them. You will need, and that will be expensive, like really, really expensive. Not just like ingesting the logs, but for example, logs are just raw data, it's unprocessed. If you want, for example, aggregate them because you want to know like, okay, what is the like the incoming rate of this HTTP endpoint? That will take a lot of time to calculate. Maybe you are fine with that, but yeah, my suggestion would be like just put this into your application, like have logging, metrics, and distributed tracing from the beginning. And it is quite easy because like if you are, for example, using like Spring Boot 2 to the text, then like logging is coming pre-configured. You will get like SLF4J and Logback, and it is there for you. There are other projects as well that can give you like more things to your logs, not just these application logs that you usually see in applications. For example, you can turn on access logs, like the web server in your application. For example, Tomcat access logs, or Boot also supports like it's just a flag, two folks, Jerry and under two as well. You can easily turn them on. There is a project called Logbook. It's not a Spring project, but they do have a Spring Boot starter. And what Logbook does, it basically gives you payload logging capabilities, which is basically request and response logging. So as a request is coming in and going back to the client, or you are sending a request somewhere and getting a response back, those will be logged. It's pretty good. So there are a lot of things that you can do there. And Spring is giving you like a pretty good out-of-the-box experience for that. But this is true for metrics and tracing as well. So if you want, for example, metrics, we have Micrometer. And if you just put Spring Boot actuator onto your class path, you will get metrics out of the box immediately. And if you are in Spring Boot like 2, you just put like Spring Cloud Sleuth onto your class path. And that is the distributed tracing support. So everything is auto-configured for you. You just put the charts there, and you will get all these three immediately.
Cool. So if I add the Spring Boot actuator, you're saying I get some metrics out of the box there. What are some of the big metrics that I might want to pay attention to if I have actuator in my project?
So that highly depends on your situation. For example, if you have like a web service and you are listening on like HTTP requests, or like you are receiving HTTP requests, you might want to have some kind of like metrics around that, and know how much time did it take to process these messages, what was the traffic, what was your error rate, and so on. There are like a couple of articles around this. If you start like Googling around like HTTP metrics and so on, you will find like some of these, like incoming rates, error rates, also duration. Usually these are also called like red metrics. And Spring will or Spring Boot will give these to you like out of the box. Also, it will give you like other information, like, hey, what was the HTTP status code? And you can query based on that. Like, hey, I want to know how much, not just like the incoming rate, I want to know the incoming rate of 200s and 404s. And also I want to know like if a 404 takes like significantly more time or less time than a 500, and so on. So if you go to boot, add micrometer and start, there is a /actuator/metrics endpoint that you can start from the get-go, and you can start basically discovering what is there. That's a good starting point. Though don't use that in production, because that is for like troubleshooting and discoverability.
Right. So I know one thing we've done in the past. We've brought we have the actuator on. We're enabling these metrics. We're collecting these metrics. At this point, it's a whole bunch of data points, right? We need some kind of way to kind of visualize these, right? I know in the past we've brought these into different tools like Grafana to say, to have dashboards to say like, hey, if we start seeing requests over a certain threshold, those are the things I want to see, because that lets me know that something is going wrong here. We can go ahead and look at it. Is that still the case? Is Grafana something we use for that? Do you have any recommendations on where to kind of dump those metrics in and get some like view of it?
Yeah, so there are a lot of tools. If you, for example, go to micrometer.io, which is the micrometer documentation site, it has a list of what are the metrics backend that we support. And that's a long list, like kind of like 20 of them. They have their advantages and disadvantages. The docs will call it out as well. If you go to the concepts site of micrometer.io, but what we can see that most of the users are usually using Prometheus.
Okay.
For this, I believe that is the most popular metrics backend as of today. But yeah, as you said, Prometheus doesn't really have like good like visualization capabilities. It's mostly a backend. It can show you some graphs, but Grafana is usually a little bit better in this. And the other advantage of Grafana is that you can basically wire it together with other backends as well. Right. You will need to change your queries, because Grafana is just like using the same query language. Right. Also, there are a lot of products that you can buy, and they are like SaaS products. We have VMware has Wavefront or Tanzu Observability. You can use that as well.
Cool.
There is a cool feature of Tanzu Observability with boot. If you want to, so it's a paid product, but if you want to use it, you can get a trial version. And in order to try it out, you don't necessarily need to register. If you add the Wavefront starter, if you, for example, go to StarSpring.io, you add the Wavefront starter. Once your boot application starts up, it will create a trial user for you. Nice. And it will basically auto-configure everything and just spit out a link that, hey, this is your dashboard. Use it.
Cool. Yeah, so then right away, if I'm collecting metrics, then I have a place to kind of view those metrics, right?
And also traces as well.
Cool.
And that's true for Grafana too. Like nowadays, Grafana is not just only for metrics. They have like a product for logs, and they also have a product for tracing. And that's true for Wavefront as well.
Can you? I'm sorry, I just thought of something else. Can you explain the difference between a metric and a trace for anybody who may not know?
Let me go through an example of these three things. So if, for example, let's say that you you can see in the logs, in your access logs, that hey, there was a request, a single request that took like 100 milliseconds. That is basically answering the question of, hey, what happened? That's usually logs are for. Sometimes they can answer the question of why it happened, but not all the times, and they are not particularly for that situation. But sometimes they can be used for that. So 100 milliseconds, is it good or is it bad? We have no idea. Is it so? For some people, it will be eternity. If you are in the microseconds range or nanoseconds range, like 100 milliseconds is like, okay, like what happened? Like 10 years just passed. So you will need some context. And that's what really metrics is for. Because it can tell you that, hey, like the 99% of the requests was actually faster than 100 milliseconds. And also, let's say the maximum was 110. So in that context, this is pretty bad. But now you know that like what happened, you also know like if it is good or bad, but you don't know why that thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually like distributed tracing who can answer that question. So it can tell you kind of like a call stack. I can show like a demo with that later today.
Okay.
It can show you that, hey, the client called this service called another service, that other service called the database, and it can also show you that, hey, like this is how much time you spent on this service or that service on the network as well, and what was the the query time for the database. And it can tell you that, hey, this whole thing took like 100 milliseconds because the whole call was 100. The second service was 90 because the database was, I don't know, 85. And sometimes it can also tell you that, hey, the database was 85 because somebody just requested a lot of data. We don't have pagination or like, whatever. I'm not just making things up.
Right.
Also, if you, for example, have a, let's say, an error, logs can tell you like, hey, an error happened. Sometimes you can have a stack trace and it's going to say, hey, this error happened because of this. But for example, if you are just getting, like you're calling another service and it will just say, hey, HTTP 500, good luck. That's some kind of a stack trace you are not really be happy with. So yeah, logs can sometimes tell you what happened and why, but sometimes just what, you got an error. In this situation, metrics can tell you the context. Like, hey, okay, you got an error. Is it good or bad? It's definitely not good, but you don't know the blast radius. You don't know like, okay, like, is it just one error or everything is down in my applications or in my infrastructure in that environment? So let's say metrics tell you that, hey, like 0.001 per second is your error rate. That's not very high. Also, it can tell you that, hey, in the last, I don't know, 30 minutes, there was only 2 errors. So that's not bad. And you can look into that, hey, like which endpoint did this happen? Did this happen on the, I don't know, getting the user profile endpoint, which maybe the user just refreshed? Or was this the transferring $1 million transaction? There is a difference. And yeah, so based on this logging, metrics can tell you the context and you will have a much better insight. And lastly, tracing can tell you why did this happen. Basically, you will see this call stack I just talked about, and you will see which one, like where the error was like propagated from. Where is it coming from? For example, hey, like you had like service A called B that called the database, and everything was fine. There is no timeouts, but the database call failed because I don't know, there was a invalid input error. And there was some missing validation, but the database validated it and shoot an error back to you. So yeah, that's basically the gist of it. That's how you can use these 3 things. But yeah, there are also like more, as I said, but these are the most like common ones.
Cool. Thanks for that explanation. That helps me clear some things up in my head.
So where do we start? I think what I heard was the actuator gets us a long way. That's a belief that I've held. The actuator endpoint it's the thing that changed everything for me. This is years ago, but I was exploring some of these other frameworks and there was nothing like the actuator. And when I didn't have access to production, those actuator endpoints made such a big difference in what I was able to do, what I was able to act on. And beyond just the metrics that I got, the actuator had a lot of other functionality that I could do. I could change logging at using the endpoints. But we said it last week as well. Don't expose those to the public. Don't expose those in production. They can be in production. You can have them exposed, but they should be secured some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, actually, more than that, in actuator, what you can also do, like if you put like Spring security on the class path, Those will be restricted from, or like first they are disabled. So you need to like enable them explicitly, and you might want to decide you don't want to enable like some of them in production. Maybe you do, but if you have, for example, like Spring Security, those will be like secured. And also you can put the actuator every endpoint into like another port.
Mm-hmm.
So that you basically can like say that, hey, I am just letting this for the public, my public endpoints, but the actuator endpoints only from the internal network. So you can get like an additional, a little bit more of a peace of mind maybe.
And that's the model that I like. That's the model that I followed. It works.
Secure by default. I like it.
Yeah, but putting it into a different port doesn't save you. You will need, if you need to like restrict it, then you just put Spring Security on the class path and have some kind of authentication of these endpoints, because that is a much better place to be.
Cool. So the 3 pillars of observability kind of leads us to, all right, well, we know that, but Spring Boot 3 is coming, Spring Framework 6 is coming. What's changing with observability in these 2 new releases?
A lot. Everything. So let me start with Spring Cloud Sleuth, because as I mentioned, Spring Cloud Sleuth is the distributed tracing solution for Spring. And Spring Cloud Sleuth is basically 2-3 things. One, it has a common API for distributed tracing. So you can use the Spring Cloud Sleuth API and instrument your application. The other thing is Spring Cloud Sleuth has bridges for tracing libraries. So once you use this API, these API calls will go to different tracing solutions based on your setup. By default, it is OpenZipKin's Brave, so that will be used under the hood. But you can also use OpenTelemetry. And as like it is configured, you are using the same API. It's kind of like a Select4j in a smaller scale. So that is one thing, or like 2 things. Like one is the API, second is the bridges. And also Spring Cloud Sleuth provides instrumentation support for Spring projects. Like Boot is instrumented, a lot of things. Spring Security is instrumented. Most of the Spring projects are instrumented, if not all of them. And there will be a big change, because like Spring Cloud Sleuth as of today is like at version 3. Once the Spring 6 and Boot 3 timeline will come, there will not be Spring Cloud Sleuth 4. We are discontinuing Spring Cloud Sleuth, and we are moving the code base, the API, into a new project, which is called Micrometer Tracing. So basically, Spring Cloud Sleuth just moves to Micrometer. We are like changing the package name, and that's all. The advantage of this is Spring Cloud Sleuth basically depends on Boot. So if you need a Spring Boot application with Micrometer Tracing, you don't. You will just get the API. It doesn't have any Spring dependencies. You don't even need a Spring app in order to use that, or not a Boot app. It will also help you, because Spring Boot will auto-configure everything for you. Out of the box, you will get the experience without that you need to do it on your own. So that's one big thing, that we are moving Sleuth to Micrometer Tracing. And this is quite important, because we are getting a lot of like comments that, hey, like, where is the next version of Sleuth? I don't find it. Yeah, because now it's Micrometer Tracing. But the only difference is basically the project name and the package. The other thing, which is another like big thing that we are using in the Boot 3 timeline, is the Observation API. And the Observation API is a new set of API of Micrometer. And what it does is basically it is trying to generalize these things, like definitely generalize looking metrics and distributed tracing, but other things as well. So for example, if you have an application and you want to instrument it because you have like business logic, you want to instrument that. If you want looking metrics and distributed tracing, You need to put your logging lines there. You need to like start and stop a timer because you want to measure how much time did that like business logic take. And also you need to like create a span, start it and stop it, and so on. So basically you need to instrument your application at least like twice or 3 times because of this. And this is with anything. It doesn't matter what you use. You want metrics, you instrument for metrics. You want tracing, you instrument for tracing, and so on. The Observability API basically generalizes this. It says that, hey, or you can say that, hey, I want to start an observation. Whatever that means. I will tell that later what that means. And hey, there was an error. Let me signal that error. That, hey, during the observation an error happened. And hey, I want to stop the observation here. So with this, what you can do is we are providing you kind of like a listener or handling mechanism. So when these events happen, like, hey, somebody started an observation, somebody stopped your observation, we can register listeners. And on these events, they can listen to, and they can say that, hey, somebody started an observation, let me start a timer. Or another one can say, hey, let me like start a span, or stop the timer and stop the span, and so on. So you are instrumenting your code once, and you will be able to get like multiple behaviors out of it. But actually, if it helps, I can show this in action.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let's do that.
So you're taking something that we could already do, but it was kind of complex with, adding all these things in your code, kind of maybe even polluting your code, make it harder to read. And you're just adding something that is now, hey, I need to observe this code. All right, let's add that.
So can you see it? Is it big enough?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So this is just like a public static void main application. This is, by the way, this is a boot tree sample. I mean, it's available in micrometer samples. There is a repo for that. But I just created a new class here to somehow like demo like what happens. So first of all, I do need an observation registry. This is where I can like store my observations, and that's where I can like get observations from. So, oops. So let me just create one, and it is as easy. So from this, I can just go ahead and say that, hey, let me create an observation, and let me also start one. And let's name it test, and I need the registry here. And I said, you can just like, oops, let's stop it twice, but stop it. So if I do this, this means that, hey, I am starting something and stopping it immediately. It doesn't make too much sense. So let me just, I want a variable. Yes. Let's say, so I am starting an observation here, and I am stopping here, and I am doing something here. So if I just run this code, like nothing really would happen. This will be like everything will be no. So this should be as fast as this code would not be there. Because I am basically not doing anything. I did not tell the observation registry what to do when somebody starts an observation or stops an observation. So that's how I can register handlers. I can say that, hey, I need an observation handler. And let's say I want metrics. And we have a handler for you. So it's this default meter observation handler. This will give you metrics. Of course, if I want metrics, I will need a meter registry. And my IntelliJ just froze. Okay, so can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Let's say I am using Prometheus. And I want to be forwards. So what I have right now is I have an observation registry. I have a meter registry. And I am saying that, hey, once observation happens, this default meter observation handler, this should listen or handle these events. And what will actually happen if I just print out, and let me do this. If I just print out an output, I should have metrics out of the box. So let me just run this. And here we go. So I have a test metric, a counter, and it is 1 because I had an observation like just once. Other things I can do is let's say an error happened. So I can signal that error. You know what? Let me do this. Let me put this into a try catch so you can see that I am starting an observation here. Indefinitely. Oops. Let me start it above. Let me stop it here. We will go there as well. And let's say I want to catch everything. And here, I just say that, hey, an error happened. And I want to keep that. And let me have another, like a method. Put something. And let's say that this error always throws an exception. And I want to observe that. So I just call it. So once I do this, I should see the additional information because like an error was signaled. And here it is.
Cool.
And this is like sometimes this is a little bit of like cumbersome, and you don't necessarily want to do this. We have like shortcuts for you, so we can just say that I want an observation. Don't start it. Let's call it test again. I need the registry, and I want to observe something. You can like observe a runnable supply, or you can observe things that can throw like exceptions. But yeah, here I can say that I want to observe the do something method. And that is essentially the same what I just like typed down. And yeah, that should come on iteration. You can do that. Yeah, there is a slight difference between the two. This one, I just swallowed the exception, which is not very good. This one will not swallow the exception, it will propagate it. So let me do that in the try block and swallow the exception so I can print out the. Actually, I don't need the finally here. So I can just print out the meter registry. Yeah, and here we go. And we have the error in your metrics. And you can see that, hey, one error happened while this test observation was running. So the magic sauce basically is this, like this observation handler mechanism, because I can also say that, hey, I want more. I don't just want metrics. I want tracing. I am not going to like do this right now because I need to like set up a whole like full-fledged tracer with a tracing library. But I will show that with Spring Boot because Boot do that for you. Instead of, I am going to inject here a little like handler or listener that will actually listen to these events, and it will put them to system out. So I should see the metrics because those were there. And now I can see these events coming, like, hey, somebody started an observation. this open and closing mechanism, I am not going to talk about this today, but we will talk about this on Spring 1. These are important, but it's kind of like a more advanced functionality. But you can see that, hey, somebody started an observation, an error happened and stopped the observation. And you can see the error. You can see like this took, like it was quite fast because nothing really happens. But if I put like a thread sleep here, let's put this there. I don't know, 500 milliseconds, and
exception.
Let's do this. So if I rerun this, then here, yeah, it was half a second.
Cool. And so this example that you're running now is just in a plain old Java object. This is not a Spring application.
This is not a Spring application whatsoever. No Spring at all. This is just like me saying that, hey, I want a registry and I want to register these handlers.
Cool.
So if you are running in a Spring Boot application, you will get these out of the box.
Perfect.
So we are providing you this default meter observation handler out of the box. If you have micrometer tracing on the class path, we are providing you a default tracing observation handler out of the box. And Boot will just get these and will register them with these observation handler.
Nice.
If you create a third one, like, hey, I want my own like custom, I don't know, I want to fire events when something happens. I want a handler for that. Because I have custom needs and I want those to happen. You can just write your handler because it's quite simple. The whole interface is just like this. What to do on start, what to do when an error happens, what to do when, if we have this as well, I will show that too. Like an arbitrary event happened, you can signal that as well. And what to do when somebody stops the observation.
Cool. So if I'm on, just so I'm clear, if I'm on start.spring.io and I'm creating like a Spring MVC app, what do I need to include in my project to get some of this stuff out of the box?
So for the minimum, you will need actuator.
Okay.
So if you, for example, if you are, let's say you are in Spring Boot 2 and you want metrics, then you need to add like Spring Boot actuator, and the actuator will bring you micrometering.
Okay.
That's the same mechanism actually in Spring Boot 3.
All
if
right.
you want this observation API, or if you just want metrics, just bring actuator in. You can also say that, hey, I want like a micrometer tracing too. Then you will get this this experience out of the box. Probably you need to be on the latest snapshots right now, or like on RC1. It should be released, I guess, in like 3 weeks.
Cool. Right.
But I can show that as well, like what happens in a full-fledged like a Spring application.
Yeah, that'd be great, because like you
right
said,
now,
we get that experience then out of the box where we don't, the normal Spring programming experience where we don't have to configure all these things. They're just kind of given to us.
So right now we are in this micrometer samples repo, and there is this micrometer samples boot 3 sample.
Cool.
I will show. And it is quite simple because this is just a Spring Boot application. Nothing really interesting here. It is just like web and actuator. I am also putting like some versions here because like I will need some features. And I am just saying that, hey, I want my meter registry to be Prometheus, and I want my tracing library be Brave. But I don't necessarily need to do this.
Okay.
You will get, for example, a in-memory registry out of the box, and for the tracing, I guess that's one that we should figure out because right now Brave is the default, but you don't necessarily like want that like a full-fledged tracing library. So if you don't want that can happen. So you can basically change that. So yeah, I have a couple of dependencies here. And yeah, that is my application. I just have a controller. And what I do in the controller, I basically just like create like observations, and I observe things. And yeah, I am intentionally slowing those down. And here, like this is like the simple shortcut I showed you, that create an observation and call observe on it. And this is kind of like a full-fledged example where you create your observation manually, you start it manually, you stop it manually, signaling an error manually, and you add like a bunch of metadata here. These are like tags that you can attach to your observation, and these will be there. Like these data will be accessible to your metrics and to distributed tracing or whatever handler you can have. So the handlers will get access to this data, also to the events and so on. There are a lot of things that you can do here, which I'm not going to show, but I want to call out that there are a ton of data that you can attach.
Would you say, so on line 46 in all people method, would you say that these are two different scenarios? One, I just want to create an observation and register it and pass some information into it. The second one in greet, if you need more metrics, more information about what's going on, is that why you're doing that down there? Are both sufficient?
Yes. So this one is basically a shortcut for the most common use case.
Okay.
But you want to observe something, a method. You can also attach like some of these things here. So you can say that, hey, I am attaching like some metadata here.
Cool.
You can see foobar or whatever. But this will also do exactly this, what you can see here. So if an error, if an exception is thrown out, then it will do this. If you want to do something else, for example, you have some kind of mechanism here that you want to call, then this will not be sufficient for you, because what this will do is this. Like this is quite simple. And what this does is like basically what you see here. Or if you want to, for example, like attach an event or like attach tags after start, you will not have that control here. So this is like a shortcut for a common use case, which might be sufficient for you, maybe most of the times. Cool. But if you want like full control, you can do this.
So in a common code base, you would expect to see a mix of these then.
Yes. Depending on your situation. And also like in a common code base, what I am doing here is, if you just want to observe your HTTP endpoints, Boot will do that for you.
Okay.
You don't need to do that. Right now, what I am having here, it is not auto-configured yet.
Okay.
So I need to create an observation in order to see something. But by the time of RC1, like Boot 3 RC1, we hope that this will be auto-configured. Awesome. And the support is already there. It is just the auto-configuration piece that is missing right now. And Boot will create an observation for this API call. So whatever you do here, it will be observed. You want to create an observation if you want to observe your business logic.
Right. That auto-configuration, the magic. That's where the magic happens.
Yes, exactly. So
I got a couple. I was going to say, we do have a question in there. Do we get some sort of starter from Spring Boot for tracing, like Spring Boot Micromedia Tracing, Brave starter, or tracing some other starter?
It's an actuator. So right now, if you will not get like a different starter, everything will be built into actuator. If you want tracing, put micrometer tracing on the class path. Spring Boot will say that, hey, there is micrometer tracing, let me auto-configure that for you. And it will do the magic. And you will get a full-fledged tracer for your setup.
Cool.
Yeah, so this application right now that you can see, it's like instrumented like this, it is already running. And what this sample is doing it is basically trying to give you the full experience out of the box. And what that means is, if you want like metrics, you need a metrics backend. If you want tracing, you need a tracing backend. Now the sample contains those. We have a Docker Compose file here. And if you just run Docker Compose up, this will start Zipkin, Prometheus, and Grafana as well in Docker.
Cool.
And that's what I have here. They are running, and what I can do is basically just open these. So let me grab a browser quickly. And if I want to see Prometheus, I have it. It's here. If I check, the name of the observation was greeting, as far as I guess. Where is it in the controller? Yes.
Yep.
So if I just start searching for greeting, I can see a lot of metrics.
Wow,
here.
cool.
So I can see like how many active greetings do I have. If, for example, if a greeting can take like a lot of time, for example, this is a batch app or this is a Spring Cloud task app, this can be very, very interesting because I can see like how many active transactions are running. Or if this is an application which has like a very, very high concurrency, like I have like 200 concurrent requests that are running.
Right.
Or like 1,000, I am looking at Reactor apps or maybe Loom. This can be interesting. This can tell you that, hey, at this point of time, you had like 1,000 concurrent requests that you were processing, and it just went up or like fall down. You can get like how many failed and a bunch of things. So on top of this, I can show a Grafana dashboard in a second for this because Grafana is also running. But what you can also do is the Zipkin is here. So you can see all of these applications, these greetings. I am, by the way, generating content as well. Like there is a, let me go that. I probably skipped that mentioning. There is a generate load script. This is just curling my endpoint and that's all. And every once in a while it is causing some trouble, but I will show that as well. So if I just click into that, you can see that, hey, like that was a greeting. This is one single request, or one single observation. This took 200 milliseconds and Mike was greeted. This is not very like visible here because distributed tracing is the best when you have like some distributed applications.
Yeah.
I don't. So it would look differently, and this will basically like bloom up. I can actually show you the screenshot, I guess, quickly. So this can be like much more crowded as you add like more and more transactions, and as you will have
cool
more and more data in it. So that's another thing. Also, if I check the logs of this application, like this is logging for every single request, like fetching the data or something. But what is interesting here is that this is the, oh, that was an exception. I told you it is causing trouble too. You can see that this is the like name of the application, and these are the tracing information. So if I just like try to look for this one wasn't found. I need to be a little bit faster, I guess, so that I can find these in Zipkin, because those should be here. So this one in Zipkin, that is the same thing what I get from the logs, and this is really good if you want to correlate to like what happened to like, hey, this is what I saw in the logs, for example, a stack trace. And yeah, this is a Grafana dashboard based on those metrics that are.
I remember these.
So there are quite a few things happening here. For example, here I have a dashboard to like, hey, like what are the incoming greetings by like who was greeted. Like Mike was greeted approximately like 0.6 times per second. Susie was greeted 1.22 here. Also, you can see on this other panel that this is like the total greetings, around like 2, but some of them has just failed. And at this point, you can ask, okay, why? How can I find out why this was failing? And there is a thing called exemplars that are very, very handy here. Exemplars are basically additional metadata that you can attach to your metrics. And what they do is basically, it's an example, I don't know, like request or example operation that belongs to that single data point. So if I just check this failing, there is an exemplar around it.
Nice.
And what this exemplar contains is the trace ID and the span ID. And also, since I told Grafana where is my Zipkin endpoint and how the Zipkin URL look like, I can just press this button. Yes. And I am here in my tracing backend. And I can see, hey, this is red, this is failing. And the arrow was invalid name, and the name was QWERTY, which is not a valid name in this application.
This is so cool because, I mean, it's one thing to get an application to production, but man, your managers, bosses, whoever you're doing work for, they are going to love you if you have this stuff in place, because you can go to them and say, hey, look at these things that I'm watching for in production. If something goes wrong, we will know what goes wrong, and we'll be able to kind of proactively, pay some attention to it instead of reactively like getting calls from someone saying this isn't working. So I love this stuff. This is so cool.
So basically these can bound these three together. So because the logs, they have the information about, hey, this is the trace ID, this is the span ID. Of course, the distributed tracing backend will have this information. This is the trace ID and this is the span ID. You can correlate these. This is called like log correlation. But now, with the use of exemplars, you can correlate these three together, because now you have a example trace ID here as well that belongs to like this time range. It is very, very important that this is a example. So if you had like, I don't know, 1 million requests coming in that one, I don't know, single second or 1 minute, you might have just a couple of exemplars. It depends on your sampling decision. So this is an example, which based on like your drill down with your logs, you can say that, hey, I want to see an example for when something was okay, and I want to see an example when something was not okay. And the same thing, this is a latency graph. Like this is like a TP95, and this is max. And you can see that the TP95 is usually like 200. And these are the example data points for that. But sometimes it is not 200, it's 1.2 seconds. And I want to see why that happened. And you can just like go there. This will not tell you why it happened, because like this is not a distributed application. This is just a thread sleep in this greeting. But if I would like create another observation that I am like watching that thing, you will be able to tell that, hey, this whole greeting took like 1.2 seconds because like an underlying operation took like this much.
Nice. Cool. I love it.
So yeah, this is our plan is that you will get this by RC1 of Spring Boot 3. All of the building blocks right now are there. So if you want this, you can basically just like wire them together, and also like you can try out the sample applications. Oh, by the way, let me show something else. Let me stop this application. Also, let me stop this as well, because we have actually a database sample. So if I start that and start complicating things a little bit,
what could go wrong?
Let's see. So if I hit, this is the exact same application with the exact same APIs. The only difference is that this is backed by the database and the other one just backed by a array list. So if I hit that and I say localhost and hit it, then I will see, I should see this, hopefully. Yeah,
Nice.
So now this is a little bit different because you can see that, hey, this boot database sample, this took this much of time. And also it made a database connection using this spool with this driver. So you know what is the database. You also know that what is the name of the database. By default, it's called data source. But if you call it, I don't know, boot tree sample DB, then you will see that here. So you will know if you have multiple databases and you are talking to multiple databases, you will see it as well. You can see that the query was made, and this was the query.
Wow.
And yeah, this is the server address, which is, this is an in-memory database, so it is data source, but you will see the database host name here. And yeah, this is processing basically the result set. It was just a single row.
Yeah, so you get some real good information there. If a request is taking a long time and the bulk of that time is the database query, maybe we have something going wrong there.
Yeah, here it's not the case because there is a thread sleep here. But
Yeah.
you get the idea. That's exactly what this is for.
I think what you just said was 8.448 milliseconds was not too slow. That's what I heard.
Yeah, here we are in the microseconds range.
Yeah.
That's where we should be. I have a couple of questions.
Just go ahead.
Of course, when I hear you talk, when I hear most of our guests talk, I'm over here doing the same thing. I'm trying to keep up. I want to take it for a spin. I want to start out Sprint.io, and I'm doing stuff. One of the questions earlier was, hey, what about the logging? Let me go back. I think it was here, Alexander. Hey, log back. We talked earlier. Let's start logging. A great place to start. If you don't have access to expose a metrics endpoint or some metrics or tracing backend, logging is a great place to start. One of the defaults, one of the just things I've learned over time, the scar tissue, is that in production, I only want to see errors. I do not want to see stack traces. So to make those types of changes in my logging configuration, maybe that's a good first step of explaining like, hey, here's a good example of changing your logs. One of the other things that I did was I made my logs Logstash compatible. So all my logs are getting output as JSON. Add a little bit to my logs, but when it comes time to go and analyze it, because I didn't have the other backend stores, I could do some interesting things with it. Give me some of your logging tips and tricks for getting started with Spring Boot.
Yeah, so if you are using Boot, as I said, logging will be auto-configured for you. By default, it's logback. If you are using Log4j2, you just need to exclude a jar and include another one. So it's pretty easy. But what Boot does out of the box, it will give you a lot of stuffs in terms of logging. So basically, your logging config files, they are coming from Boot. I don't have any. If you check, I don't have a loopback XML here. So all of these stuffs, these are baked into Boot. There is a configuration, there are configuration files for loopback and for Log4j as well. So if you check the defaults here, I believe that usually what I do is I'm just going with these. And if I want to do additional things, hey, I want another appender, or I want change the log levels or do some filtering, you can do two things. One is you can add the logback XML file where you can define these. And there is also a Spring logback XML file that you can add. The advantage of doing that is that you will have access to all of these things. You can basically have a reference to this console log pattern or character set or whatever is defined here. Yeah. So all of these, you will have access to that. By default, what I usually do is just go with the defaults that Boot gives me, and I am also defining levels for loggers. But I am usually not doing too much in terms of logging. I can show you an example if I go. This is another example app I have. And hopefully this has some loopback configuration. Yeah, this is the loopback Spring file I talked about. So what I'm doing here, I am basically just logging out to console output and to file as well. And these things, these are defined in the Boot configuration. I am just reusing that, and I am saying hey, this is the name of the file I want. I also like define this logger, which I want this to be on like level all, and go to the this file, and yeah, basically that's all.
Great stuff.
I have more questions here. Let me add this. I didn't see the Redis time series over here. What do I do if I want to add a Redis backend? How do I get started doing something like that? You know, I have these registries for all these other types. How would I go about adding a registry?
Yeah,
so it's an open source project. It seems like that'd be a fun something to do.
Yeah, actually, like these are the registries that Micrometer supports out of the box.
Wow.
And
wait, where's that? What is that URL? Let's get that thrown in. Oh.
So if you just go to like github.com micrometer metrics, this is in the Micrometer repo, and in the Micrometer repo, it is like under the implementations folder. Yeah. Also, if you open this list, is also available here. If you go to Micrometer.io documentation, here are the registries that we are supporting. And for example, if you want to use, I don't know, Elastic, you can like just copy paste these things and you're good to go. If you happen to be on a Spring Boot application, you don't really need to do anything. You just like get the jar, set some properties. You don't need to define dependency, or like you need like at least this. But yeah, you don't need to do anything else. It will be auto configured for you.
Oh, but I want to add a registry. I want to add a new one.
So if you want to implement one,
yep.
What I would do is like, first of all, it depends on your backend, because like different backends, they behave differently. Mm-hmm. So what you need to do in the like a very, very like a high level perspective, you just need to implement a meter registry. So if I, for example, go to Prometheus, there should be a Prometheus meter registry sitting here. And if I open that, it just like implements or extends meter registry.
Okay.
So from the high level, that's what you should do. But what complicates things is that like meter or metrics backends, they behave differently. Mm-hmm. So if, for example, if you go to the supported monitoring systems sections in Micrometer, you can see that some of them are dimensional, some of them mm-hmm. are hierarchical. This, whatever this means, this changes things.
Yes.
Also, like how they aggregate rates, that changes things. If you need to push the data to them, like in a frequency, like every minute I want to aggregate everything and push to the backend, or you are polled, for example, in case of Prometheus, the metrics backend is polled. So what I would say is that try to categorize based on this what you want to do, and check those registries, because like these are implemented, these are already there. Check what is going on in them. There are also 2 registries that you can take a look, and because these are kind of like debugging or troubleshooting or getting to know with Micrometer. We have a logging meter registry. What it does, it will basically pushes everything into logs every 1 minute by default.
Nice.
Wow.
We also have a in-memory meter registry. It is called the simple meter registry.
This is that's really, really interesting. And
this will just not push them everywhere.
Sooner. Very interesting. Last thing is I'm getting started, but a lot of my use cases are out on the edge, and I don't always know like where that metrics endpoint lives, or maybe I don't even have access to it. But I want to still get metrics from those things. There's a plugin extension for the RSocket gateway. And this RSocket gateway makes it really, really interesting and fairly easy to register those endpoints, register those workloads that are on the edge that I don't have access to, yet I can still consume them. And the second part of this question is, I remember having a dashboard associated with this. What's your default Grafana dashboard for getting started? And is there one available here? Because I didn't see one when I went to look at the Grafana dashboards that looked like it was really current. Is there a good starting point for one of those?
So we are talking about this, right? The Prometheus RSocket proxy.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. So what this does is because like Prometheus is pool-based, that means that your application needs to open a port so that it can be polled by Prometheus. And if you cannot really like open a port, you cannot really open an ingress, then yeah, Prometheus will not work. So there are things to basically like get around that. You can maybe use the Prometheus gateway. There is a push gateway. And also there is the Prometheus RSocket proxy. What this does is this is an application which will start and it will open a connection, or your application will call this application, the proxy, and open a channel. And once the channel is created, basically it doesn't matter who is the client and who is the server. It's a two-way channel. And your application basically will get requests from the proxy, and the proxy will just gather the data. And once the proxy gathers the data, since the proxy should be able to open a ingress, that's the whole thing. Prometheus can actually scrape your proxy, and you can have like multiple applications talking to the proxy. Also, when the application shuts down, before it dies, it just like last breath, it just sends the data that it had to the proxy. So this is good for ephemeral apps as well. Yep. If you have a situation like that, like, hey, my Prometheus instance is querying my apps like every 30 seconds, but my app just starts and stops 6 times in that 30 seconds. What should I do? This is a good good thing to have for that use case, because your application will initiate the connection, the channel will be created, and in the graceful shutdown process, your application will just like send the metrics before it shuts down.
It's so powerful, and I think I will. I think I'd like to spend an hour or two just demonstrating just this use case. And in my mind, and I'm asking as a question, in my mind, I could use this for some of my serverless workloads, my high volume workloads. I want to capture, I don't know, they're scaling automatically, but I still want metrics. I want to find out how things are working. And this is a great example of, I don't need the list of addresses to go scrape. They connect and they create that two-way street in order to get metrics. Agree? Yeah, that's a good approach.
And to answer your definitely, yes, that's one of the use cases for this. And actually, like Glenn Renfro, who works on like Spring Cloud Task, he has users who are using Task with Prometheus, and they are having this exact use case. So talk to him.
Yes,
he knows people who are using this exactly for this. And to answer your other question, Grafana dashboards, there is a thing called Grafana Hub, where you can find like Spring Boot dashboards, multiple ones with multiple backends. Like Prometheus is one of them. And we don't have official dashboards there, but you can find some community ones. The only official dashboard for Spring Boot that I am aware of is like a Wavefront Spring Boot dashboard that will be automatically created for you if you are like using Wavefront.
So I think I've, in just the course of today's show, I think I've identified at least 2 cool projects that would be really, really fun to kind of dig into for myself or somebody in the show. That'd be super powerful and super beneficial for the community. So yeah, Jonatan, this has been awesome. You always get my wheels turning, and this is great, wonderful. But there's so much more, right? We only kind of scratched the surface. So I think we'll have to like circle back and have you come back. One of the things I'd like to do is like just talk about like, hey, here's a good place to start. Like maybe like a 101, 102, 103. Like, hey, here's a good start. Here's a next step, right? Kind of show the progression that you might do or you might take as you're developing your Spring Boot apps.
Yeah, I think especially too after Spring Boot 3 is released, to see some of the changes that get into there. So that'll be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. So
Also, you can find me, I will give 2 talks on Java 1, and I will give at least, like it seems now, at least 2 talks on Spring 1 as well.
Cool.
So if you want some kind of like a deeper dive, then yeah, just you can find me there, and yeah, you can watch my talks there.
Cool. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show today and breaking this down for simplicity's sake, so even DaShaun and I could understand this.
Thank you for having me.
I think I have a good idea now. I think I have a good idea now. Like you said, like DaShaun said, the wheels are spinning. Now I can at least get started with some of this stuff. So I'm excited to give it a try. We'll share some more on upcoming shows, and hopefully we can have you on again after spring, or after Spring Boot 3 is released, and maybe after around Spring 1 time. Maybe we'll talk to you then. So really appreciate it. Thanks for everyone for joining the show today, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you so much, Anbu. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.